Everybody, welcome back to Storytime with Grandma Kate. In this video, we're going to enjoy a wonderful Frog and Toad book called Frog and Toad Together. This summer, I'm going to be sharing a lot of the Frog and Toad stories with you. So if you liked Fox Best, that seems to be my most popular group of videos on my YouTube channel. So if you like that one, I'm sure you'll love Frog and Toad. If you've not already done so, click like on this video and subscribe to my channel so that you can be updated with all the brand new videos that I'm posting. And I have a brand new email address that you can write to with suggestions and comments. It's storytimewithgrandmakate@gmail.com. And I've already been receiving some emails from readers with suggestions, and I can't wait to read them for you. But let's go ahead and start off with Frog and Toad Together. If you're an early reader, you may want to hit pause on this video and see if you can read the words yourself. This book has 5 chapters in it. We're going to read a list, the garden, cookies, dragons and giants, and the dream. So we're going to start with a list. One morning, Toad sat in bed. "I have many things to do," he said. "I will write them all down on a list so that I can remember them." Toad wrote on a piece of paper, "A list of things to do today." Then he wrote, "Wake up." "I have done that," said Toad, and he crossed that out. We always wake up, don't we? Then Toad wrote other things on the paper. "Eat breakfast, get dressed, go to Frog's house, take walk with Frog, eat lunch, take nap, play games with Frog, eat supper, go to sleep." Now, that's a list I could get a grip on. That sounds like a fun list of things like I might do on the weekend. "There," said Toad. "Now my day is all written down." He got out of bed and had something to eat. Then Toad crossed out, "Eat breakfast." Toad took his clothes out of the closet and put them on. Then he crossed out, "Get dressed." Toad put the list in his pocket. He opened the door and walked out into the morning. Soon Toad was at Frog's door. He took the list from his pocket and crossed out, "Go to Frog's house." Toad knocked on the door. "Hello," said Frog. "Look at my list of things to do," said Toad. "Oh," said Frog, "that is very nice." Toad said, "My list tells me that we will go for a walk." "All right," said Frog, "I am ready." Frog and Toad went on a long walk, and then Toad took the list from his pocket again. He crossed out, "Take walk with Frog." Just then there was a strong wind, and it blew the list out of Toad's hand. The list blew high up into the air. "Help!" cried Toad. "My list is blowing away. What will I do without my list?" Do you think he'd know what to do? "Hurry," said Frog. "We will run and catch it." "No," shouted Toad. "I cannot do that." "Why not?" asked Frog. "Because," wailed Toad, "running after my list is not one of the things that I wrote on my list to do." Frog ran after the list. He ran over hills and swamps, but the list blew on and on. At last, Frog came back to Toad. "I am so sorry," gasped Frog, "but I could not catch your list." "Bleh," said Toad. "I cannot remember any of the other things that were on my list of things to do. I will just have to sit here and do nothing," said Toad. Toad sat and did nothing, and Frog sat with him. After a long time, Frog said, "Toad, it is getting dark. We should be going to sleep now." Go to sleep, shouted Toad. That was the last thing on my list. Toad wrote on the ground with a stick, go to sleep. And then he crossed out, go to sleep. There, said Toad. Now my day is all crossed out. I am glad, said Frog. Then Frog and Toad went right to sleep. I used to be like Toad. I used to make a list of everything that I would do, and if I didn't get it done, I would be upset. But I think I'm kind of glad that list blew out of his hand so he could just be spontaneous and do nothing. Sometimes it's great fun to do nothing. I love that. The next chapter is called The Garden. Do you have a garden at your house? When I sit and read stories to you, I look out the window here and I can see my beautiful garden. I wonder what their garden will look like. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. What a fine garden you have, Frog, he said. Yes, said Frog, it is very nice, but it was hard work. I wish I had a garden, said Toad. Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground, said Frog, and soon you will have a garden. How soon? Asked Toad. Quite soon, said Frog. I know gardening is hard. It's hard for me to hold this book today because I was gardening all weekend and my hands are still really tired. But it was fun. It's worth the work. Toad ran home. He planted the flower seeds. Now, seeds, said Toad, start growing. Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, now, seeds, start growing. Toad looked at the ground again, but the seeds did not start to grow. That's silly. Those seeds need some things to grow. We know they need dirt, but do you know the two other things those seeds will need to grow? They'll need water. You need to sprinkle them with water every day. And they need sunshine, the warmth from the sun. I don't think Toad knows that because he's going to yell some more. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, now seeds start growing. Frog came running up the path. What is all this noise? He asked. My seeds will not grow, said Toad. You are shouting too much, said Frog. Those poor seeds are afraid to grow. My seeds are afraid to grow, said Toad. Of course, said Frog. Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them and let the rain fall on them, and soon your seeds will start to grow. That night, Toad looked out of his window. Drat, said Toad. My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark. So Toad went out to his garden with some candles. Make sure I didn't skip a page. Hold on. Yep, I did not. Toad went out to his garden with some candles. I will read the seeds a story, said Toad, and then they will not be afraid. Toad read a long story to his seeds. What a kind thing to do. I like to read stories or read books when I'm afraid. It's a good choice for him. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. My gosh, what lucky seeds, huh? Toad looked at the ground, and the seeds still did not start to grow. What shall I do? Cried Toad. These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world. And then Toad felt very tired, and he fell asleep. Toad, Toad, wake up, said Frog. Look at your garden. Look. Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. At last, shouted Toad, my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow. And now you will have a nice garden, said Frog. Yes, said Toad, but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work. You know, I don't necessarily play music for my plants. I do talk to them sometimes, but I have to weed and water them. See, this is when, for me, the real work begins. When they start to grow, you have to make sure that you water them every day and give them all the stuff they need. Now, the next chapter is my favorite. It's called Cookies. Do you like cookies? I like cookies. I like cookies too much. And I think that you will find out that Frog and Toad like them too. Toad baked some cookies. These cookies smell very good, said Toad. He ate one. And they taste even better, he said. Toad ran to Frog's house. Frog, Frog, cried Toad, taste these cookies that I have made. Frog ate one of the cookies. These are the best cookies I have ever eaten, said Frog. Frog and Toad ate many cookies, one after the other. You know, Toad, said Frog with his mouth full, I think we should stop eating. We will soon be sick. You are right, said Toad. Let us eat one last cookie and then we will stop. Frog and Toad ate one last cookie. I tried that trick. There were many cookies left in the bowl. Frog, said Toad, let us eat one very last cookie and then we will stop. Frog and Toad ate one very last cookie. We must stop eating, cried Toad as he ate another. Yes, said Frog, reaching for a cookie. We need willpower. What is willpower? Asked Toad. Willpower is trying hard not to do something that you really, really want to do, said Frog. You mean like trying not to eat all those cookies? Asked Toad. Right, said Frog. Yeah, I have that problem with popcorn cakes, and I used to eat chocolate. I had a real hard time stopping myself from eating M&Ms. You like M&Ms? Oh my goodness. If I had a bowl of M&Ms on the counter, they would be gone quick. That's one of the reasons I had to stop eating chocolate. Frog put the cookies in a box. There, he said. Now we will not eat any more cookies. But we can open the box, said Toad. That is true, said Frog. Frog tied some string around the box. There, he said. Now we will not eat any more cookies. But we can cut the string and open the box, said Toad. That is true, said Frog. Frog got a ladder. He put the box on a high shelf. There, said Frog. Now we will not eat any more cookies. But we can climb the ladder and take the box down from the shelf and cut the string and open the box, said Toad. That is true, said Frog. Frog climbed the ladder and took the box down from the shelf. He cut the string and opened the box. Frog took the box outside. He shouted in a loud voice, "Hey birds, here are the cookies." Birds came from everywhere. They picked up all the cookies in their beaks and flew away. Now we have no more cookies to eat, said Toad sadly. Not even one. Yes, said Frog, but we have lots and lots of willpower. You may keep it all, Frog, said Toad. I'm going home now to bake a cake. I'll be honest, I've done what they did. One time I had so many cookies I would eat them. I was afraid I would eat them all. So I smushed them all up and I gave them to the birds too. Because I have a really hard time with willpower. A lot of times I'll keep stuff in my car thinking, oh, I won't go out and get those cookies. But I do. I think of this story and I just give them to the birds. And then the next time I go to the store, I don't buy anymore. Because I have a hard time with willpower with cookies. This chapter is called Dragons and Giants. Frog and Toad were reading a book together. The people in this book are brave, said Toad. They fight dragons and giants, and they are never afraid. I wonder if we are brave, said Frog. Frog and Toad looked in the mirror. We look brave, said Frog. Yes, but are we? Asked Toad. Frog and Toad went outside. We can try to climb this mountain, said Frog. That should tell us if we are brave. Frog went leaping over rocks, and Toad came puffing up behind him. They came to a dark cave. A big snake came out of the cave. Hello, lunch, said the snake when he saw Frog and Toad. He opened his mouth wide. Frog and Toad jumped away. Toad was shaking. Oh, but I'm not afraid, he cried. I'd be afraid if a snake called me lunch. They climbed higher, and they heard a loud noise. Many large stones were rolling down the mountain. It's an avalanche, cried Toad. Frog and Toad jumped away. Frog was trembling. But I'm not afraid, he shouted. They came to the top of the mountain, and the shadow of a hawk fell over them. Frog and Toad jumped under a rock, and the hawk flew away. We are not afraid, screamed Frog and Toad at the same time. Then they ran down the mountain very fast. They ran past the place where they saw the avalanche. They ran past the place where they saw the snake. And they ran all the way to Toad's house. Frog, I am glad to have a brave friend like you, said Toad. He jumped into the bed and pulled covers over his head. And I'm happy to know a brave person like you, Toad, said Frog. He jumped into the closet and shut the door. Toad stayed in the bed and Frog stayed in the closet. They stayed there for a long time, just feeling very brave together. I would be scared of all that stuff. There's no shame in them being afraid of that. Boy, howdy, if I were a frog and I had a snake coming after me, I'd hit it quick. And the last chapter is called The Dream. Do you ever have dreams? I had a bunch of weird dreams last night, and they were all mixed up, like stuff I do with my family and stuff I do in the yard and stuff that I do with my cats. It was a crazy dream. Let's see what Toad is dreaming. Toad was asleep. He was having a dream. He was on a stage and he was wearing a costume. Toad looked out into the dark. Frog was sitting in the theater. A strange voice from far away said, "Presenting the greatest Toad in all the world." Toad took a deep bow. Frog looked smaller as he shouted, "Hooray for Toad!" "Toad will now play the piano very well," said the strange voice. Toad played the piano, and he did not miss a note. "Frog," cried Toad, "can you play the piano like this?" "No," said Frog. It seemed to Toad that Frog looked even smaller. "Toad will now walk on a high wire and he will not fall down," said the voice. Toad walked on the high wire. "Frog," cried Toad, "can you do tricks like this?" "No," peeped Frog, who looked very, very small. I wonder why Toad is dreaming that Frog is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Do you remember, I can't remember which Kevin Henkes book I read to you. I think it was Lily. Oh, Lily and the Purple Plastic Purse maybe. And there was a page where they showed her getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Why do you think Toad is dreaming that Frog is getting smaller? "Toad will now dance and he will be wonderful," said the voice. "Frog, can you be as wonderful as this?" said Toad as he danced all over the stage. But there was no answer. Toad looked out into the theater. The Frog was so small that he could not even be seen or heard. "Frog," said Toad, "where are you?" There was still no answer. "Frog, what have I done?" cried Toad. Then the voice said, "The greatest Toad will now—" "Shut up!" screamed Toad. "Frog, Frog, where have you gone?" Toad was spinning in the dark. "Come back, Frog," he shouted. "I will be very lonely." "I am right here," said Frog. Frog was standing near Toad's bed. "Wake up, Toad," he said. "Frog, is that really you?" said Toad. "Of course it is me," said Frog. "And are you your own right size?" asked Toad. Yes, I think so, said Frog. Toad looked at the sunshine coming through the window. Frog, he said, I am so glad that you came over. I always do, said Frog. And then Frog and Toad ate a big breakfast. And after that, they spent a fine, long day together. I wonder if that last story was about Toad wanting to be better than Frog. And so he was doing all this cool stuff on stage, and his friend was like being less and less and less and less. But then Toad realized that it's better to have a friend than to try to be better than your friends. And that's one of the reasons I love these Frog and Toad books. They're all about two great friends who have fun together. So if you have any story ideas for me, email them to storytimewithgrandmakate@gmail.com. And I'll put a link to this book at our Toledo Lucas County Public Library so you can go check it out and read it yourself. Until I see you the next time, have a great day, everybody.